नमस्कार, गुड मॉर्निंग दोस्तों और अभिवादन आप सभी को। देखिए हमारे साथ आज मौजूद हैं हमारे दोस्त राजा मुनीब भाई और आज हम बात करने जा रहे हैं। इसका बैकग्राउंड आज की बातचीत का है, जो अभी स्ट्राइक्स हुई हैं यूएस की। यूएस और यूके ने मिलकर जो रेड सी पर अभी जो कॉन्फ्लिक्ट चल रहा है उसकी बैकग्राउंड में, और जो अभी यमन पर जो स्ट्राइक्स हुई हैं, हाउदीज को क्रश करने के लिए उनके अड्डों पर जो स्ट्राइक्स हुई हैं। तो विचार हमारा ये है कि बात की जाए इसकी बैकग्राउंडर पर, कि दरअसल ये इसका जो बैकग्राउंड है वो क्या है, और फिर ये कि यहाँ ऑनवर्ड्स दरअसल इसके पीछे पॉलिटिक्स क्या है। एक बैकग्राउंड प्लस राजा भाई ये कि इसके पीछे जो हमारी पॉलिटिक्स है करंट जो है, और फिर ये किस दिशा में जाता हुआ लग रहा है, किस डायरेक्शन में जाता हुआ लग रहा है। इस पर हमें बैकग्राउंडर और उसका तमाम पॉलिटिक्स का जो हिसाब किताब है वो बताएंगे हमारे राजा भाई। वेलकम राजा भाई टू द शो। और फ्लोर इज ऑल योर्स।
बिल्कुल।
आप बताएं कि दरअसल ये चल क्या रहा है। ये बिल्कुल कंफ्यूजिंग मामला है सारे का सारा हमारे लिए। तो बताएं इसका बैकग्राउंड कि किस बैकग्राउंड में हो रहा है, और फिर करंटली क्या है, आगे क्या चलने वाला है। ओवर टू यू।
नमस्कार एक बार फिर से मौज भाई, आपको भी और व्यूअर्स को भी। बेसिकली अगर हम देखें ह्यूटीज, जिनका असली जो ऑर्गेनाइजेशन नेम है वो यू नो अंसारुल अल्लाह है, विच मींस बेसिकली सपोर्ट फॉर ऑफ गॉड। तो ये एक जो है ये यमन से ऑपरेट करते हैं। ह्यूटीज इनको बोला जाता है। देर आर प्रिडोमिनेंट शिया मेजॉरिटी ग्रुप, मिलिटेंट ग्रुप, इस्लामिक मिलिटेंट ग्रुप। और ये काफी टाइम से जो है इनका कॉन्फ्लिक्ट जो था पहले भी सऊदी अरेबिया के साथ था, क्योंकि जो यमन में गवर्नमेंट है वो सऊदी बेस्ड बैक्ड है। एंड द यू नो ईरान बैक्ड जो यूथीज थे, दे वांटेड टू टॉपल द वन इन यमन। सो काफी साल ये सऊदीज के साथ लड़ते रहे। अभी कुछ टाइम पहले इनका जो है एक पीस एग्रीमेंट साइन हुआ था। बट अगर इसको हम इसराइल और हमास की इस कॉन्टेक्स्ट में देखें, तो बेसिकली एक्सटेंशन ऑफ इसराइल है, एक्सटेंशन ऑफ इसराइली मिलिशिया है जो यमन में बैठा है। एंड व्हाट दे वांट टू डू इज, इन्होंने जो किया जब गाजा पे अटैक हुआ तो दे वांटेड कि सीज फायर हो जाए। द डिमांड इज या तो आप गाजा में इसराइल सीज फायर करे, और अगर सीज फायर नहीं करता है तो then in that case they will attack ships which they think that essentially is linked with Israel or Israel economy, going through Red Sea, going through the port of Iliad and in Israel. तो बेसिकली इनका मकसद ये है कि ये इसराइल की जो शिपिंग है उसको हिट करे। और खाली इसराइल की शिपिंग को हिट नहीं करे, बेसिकली दे वांट टू डिसरप्ट the entire Red Sea, because Red Sea से 1/3 of the global traffic of shipping जाता है। तो to put pressure on US and allies, they want to disrupt that traffic going through this Red Sea से। और उस चीज को लेकर इन्होंने सबसे पहले वो कॉस्को का एक कार्गो शिप था जो इन्होंने कहा कि इजरायली ओन्ड है बट चाइनीज कंपनी ओन करती थी, उसको इन्होंने दे ट्राई टू हाईजैक दैट शिप। इन्होंने उसको सीजैक किया। और उसके बाद इन्होंने अपने अटैक्स जो है आहिस्ता आहिस्ता जो है बाकी शिप्स पे बढ़ने लगे। दे स्टार्टेड टारगेटिंग कार्गो शिप्स, दे स्टार्टेड टारगेटिंग ऑयल एंड ऑयल टैंकर्स। इवन परसों एक रशियन ऑयल टैंकर पे भी इन्होंने अटैक किया था। तो दे आर कॉलिंग इट मिस्टेकन, बट रशियन ऑयल टैंकर भी उस अटैक की जद में आया था। So essentially the idea is to hit the Israeli economy, क्योंकि अगर आप इसराइल का देखेंगे तो the port of Iliad is very important for them। उनका चाइना से जितना पोटैश का है या बाकी चीजों का जो इलेक्ट्रिक व्हीकल्स के लिए है वो ट्रेड होता है, तो वहां से होता है। और इनके अटैक्स की वजह से 44% जो है उस एरिया का जो ट्रैफिक था वो रिड्यूस हो गया था, बिकॉज देन शिप्स हैड टू रीराउट देमसेल्व्स थ्रू बेसिकली हॉर्न ऑफ अफ्रीका जो है जिसको कहते हैं, वहां से एक लंबा रूट बनता है वो। तो उसका एक ग्लोबल इम्पैक्ट जो है वो इकोनॉमिक इम्पैक्ट जो है वो एक ग्लोबली भी बनता है। एक तो ऑयल पे बनता है, उसके बाद आपके कार्गो पे बनता है, लॉजिस्टिक्स पे बनता है, क्योंकि आपकी शिपिंग कॉस्ट अप चली जाती है, आपकी टाइम अप चला जाता है। सो एवरीथिंग इंक्रीजेस। ऑयल रेट हैज आल्सो गॉन अप 1% सिंस दिस ईयर, जब से इन्होंने अटैक शुरू किया है। और इसका इम्पैक्ट इजरायली इकोनॉमी पे भी बहुत एडवर्स पड़ता है, क्योंकि इसराइल का अगर आप एलएनजी का एक्सपोर्ट देखेंगे जो अबाउट 8 to 10% है, दैट इज एसेंशियली अंडर थ्रेट। तो एक वो क्रेडिबल जो एलएनजी एक्सपोर्टर इजराइल वाज ट्राइंग टू मेंटेन इट्स रेपुटेशन, वो कहीं ना कहीं हिट ले रहा है, क्योंकि उसको वो उनका वो जो एक्सपोर्ट है वो खतरे में आ रहा है, क्योंकि ships जो हैं वो continuously attack हो रहे हैं. So Houthis are basically backed by the Israelis, sorry, by the Iranians against the Israelis. And उसी backdrop में जो है इन्होंने ये attacks जो थे लगातार बढ़ाते गए. Though America tried to use a इसको deterrence policy कहते हैं कि they didn't attack them. They essentially tried to have back channel talks, or more of a deterrence language they used. It will have consequences for Yemen if they keep on doing it. So diplomatically, they were trying to avoid. They were trying to say कि कहीं रुक जाए. But Ansar का ये है कि they always are against US. They are against Israel, and they are a militant group. They're an Islamic militant group, so their target is always hurting US interest and Israeli interest in the region, and that is exactly what they are doing. नाउ अगर अब आप देखेंगे कि अब अमेरिका के पास और कोई ऑप्शन नहीं बचा, क्योंकि ग्लोबल ऑयल प्राइस भी जो है वो रेस हो रहा है. इट थ्रेटन्स द ग्लोबल इकोनॉमी, व्हाट यू कॉल इन्फ्लेशन. द इकोनॉमिक इन्फ्लेशन जो होती है उसको, बिकॉज ऑफ इंक्रीज्ड कॉस्ट, इट इज थ्रेटनिंग इन्फ्लेशन आल्सो. यूरोपियन मार्केट्स आर गेटिंग थ्रेटेंड. एशिया का एक मेजर रूट है ये, एशिया और यूरोप बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट रूट है ये. तो इस चीज को अगर देखा जाए तो they were not left with many options, but only with an option wherein they had to strike back. So there is more than 10 countries का इनका एक coalition है US का इस वक्त जो ऑपरेट कर रहा है, जिसमें UK भी है, and all these major Western aligned powers भी हैं. Even India is guarding itself in the on the periphery in the Indian Ocean and others, क्योंकि एक अटैक उस साइड से भी हुआ था जो उन्होंने कहा था कि बेसिकली के पायरेट अटैक है, but you can never rule out कि उसके पीछे मोटिव क्या था, right? So Indian ships are also involved, Indian Navy is also involved, but primarily US and UK have taken the lead in this. And they carried out about last 2 days they have carried out about 60 targeted attacks in Yemen on the suspected or on the Houthi infrastructure, because they are using a multitude of they're using drones, they're using ballistic missiles. So ये जो technology है, चलो drone तो low, it's a low cost solution of a suicide drone which essentially goes and blows itself up. But when you are escalating it to a level where you're essentially using ballistic missiles, cruise ballistic missiles, तो उसका ये मतलब है कि you are being supplied by a state nation, not a and you basically have some good weapons in your arsenal, or they pose a very grave threat and a very grave danger to the region as well if they go unchecked. So they attacked about 60 odd locations across Yemen on the Houthis. The problem with Houthis is very much what the challenge Israelis are facing in Gaza vis-a-vis Hamas. I'm sorry. Which essentially means कि जैसे the हमास का जो है कि कहा जाता है कि बहुत एक vast underground network है of tunnels, and they operate within the those tunnels. They use that for logistics, they use that for attacks. Same way Yemenis Houthis का भी यही कहा जाता है कि they operate beneath the surface, and इनका भी जो है ये underground bunkers हैं, underground tunnels हैं जिनको ये use करते हैं. So I think US का जो US और UK का जो ये combined एक offensive है now towards Yemen, it signifies an escalation in the region, and this escalation is something which is very calculated from the other side. If you remember, Iran was always saying, if Gaza doesn't stop, then Lebanon will open up a front. And Yemenis then started saying Houthis will open up a front. So there is a larger game plan of Iran and its allies and all these non-state actors to trap basically US, Israel, and their allies into a larger, broader conflict in the region. Which they know that at this point of time, essentially US has been fighting a very long war against Russia in Ukraine, and there is elections in US also. The global economy impact is very different. Then the plans, the Saudi-Israeli deal is gone off completely. So it's Middle East itself, which was looking for a different, perspective, prosperity, and geopolitical significance. जो उसका था, जो वो trade route बना रहे थे, which we saw in G20 also, they declared about it. So that is also under the threat. So essentially the whole game plan is to disrupt the Middle East, to disrupt the balance of power in that area, and for Iran to turn it favorably in its favor, and then somehow, turning it into Iran's favor means essentially turning it into China's favor, because China is something which is, an ally, partner of Iran, for a very very strong ally of and partner of Iran. So basically अगर हम देख रहे हैं तो ये इसका एक जियोपॉलिटिकल कॉनोटेशन है, दो लॉबीज हैं, या जिसको हम बोलते हैं कि टू डिफरेंट पावर एक्सिस जो है, चाइना, ईरान एंड रशिया एंड टर्की एक्सिस एक है, यूएस, यूके, वेस्टर्न ब्लॉक, ऑस्ट्रेलिया, इंडिया जो है बड़े लूज डायमेंशन में, दिस इज अ डिफरेंट ब्लॉक. So essentially what we are seeing is that there is a power struggle between the two, and the Iranians want to get the upper hand. They want to drag the US into the war, which the US really doesn't want to have it right now, because it has adverse effect on their economy and on their politics as well, right? And somehow अगर हम देखेंगे कि जब से war start हुई है, तब से the public opinion in Western countries is overwhelmingly towards the Palestinians. So that is another advantage they have. So largely इसका वही है, but अब ये है कि किस लेवल तक ये escalate होता है, how much Houthis are saying that we are going to take revenge, so we will launch more attacks. So launching more attacks and counter strikes and more strikes. Now what is important is, will Saudis join the Americans and restart its offensive in Yemen again? For now the Saudis have not shown any interest in that. They have largely sat out on this conflict now. They have not commented very adversely towards Israel also. Neither they have been very favorable or very negative to Hamas or Iran also, right? So they have played a very neutral kind of a path in this conflict. And I think most of the people are today talking about, will Saudis will be going and joining this. But I don't see Saudis joining a war against Yemen unless and until it comes to a level where their oil interests are threatened to an extent where they are not left with anything else, right? And it's just thrust on them. ये इतना out of control हो जाता है कि Saudis feel the heat, and then they are compelled to use their bases again and bomb Yemen and essentially start the whole war again. But for now it is something which risks, इसमें एक ही risk ये है कि if it doesn't stop, then what next is there for America? If they have tried with Iran, they have talked to Iran, they have sent messages to Iran, we have sent silent messages, we have sent backdoor messages. They're trying to talk to Iranians and trying to find some sort of a balance to it. And for now, I don't think Iranians are being favorable to them by heeding to their messages or trying to do something. I think the Iranians are on an offensive. It'll be a cautious offensive, but they're definitely, कहते हैं ना कि you gas the pedal, वो pedal पे आप पैर रखते हो और speed बढ़ती जाती है, तो आराम से pedal रख के आराम से speed बढ़ा रहे हैं, वो हो रहा है. And that means that if it doesn't stop, then your next stop is Iran, because if you cannot control Yemen or you cannot control the Houthis, right, or they keep on doing their attacks and they're resupplied with their armaments, with their drones, with their ballistic missiles, essentially which comes from Iran. तो उसका ये मतलब है कि then you have to hit where the head of the nail is, and that is essentially Iran. So that will be a major configuration in terms of conflict in the region. Then essentially you're looking at a much broader conflict, and that is what Iran is trying to entice the United States and Israel into. But for now they are not taking the bait, and they're being very cautious with it. Sorry.
इस कॉन्टेक्स्ट में राजा भाई ये भी आप ध्यान कीजिए कि आज नहीं, कल 15 तारीख है, कल जयशंकर जी जा रहे हैं ईरान, और जो बातें इनिशियली कही गई थी, इनिशियल सुनने में आया था कि जो ऑन एजेंडा है वो चाबहार पोर्ट है या तालिबान वाला मसला अफगानिस्तान है, लेकिन ऑफ लेट ये भी पता लगा कि नहीं, दरअसल वन ऑफ द मेजर एजेंडा इज आल्सो द क्राइसिस इन मिडिल ईस्ट. एंड सो हाउ डू यू लुक एट दैट? डू यू थिंक कि क्या ये अगेन जिसका आप इशारा कर रहे हैं कि यूएस मैसेजिंग जो कर रहा है, could it be कि Jaishankar is basically playing the ball on behalf of US and taking a message to them, कि conflict escalate ना हो, number 1. 2, अगर escalation इस तरह का होता है कि Iranians hit होते हैं, isn't the war coming little too close to us? Secondly, not to forget striking in Iran means you are next door to Pakistan as well. So it becomes a crisis which is very close to South Asia. How do you look at that scenario? Firstly,
Okay, no,
Jaishankar, and then yeah.
that is, see, as far as the external affairs minister's visit is concerned, it has mostly to do with Chabar port. Kyunki,
Mm-hmm.
our relationship with Taliban, Afghan Taliban, essentially what the humanitarian work we are carrying on is going on. And
Mm-hmm.
obviously, we are trading with Afghans as well. We use the Shabar route to send humanitarian aid, to send food, grains, and all that. We
ठीक बात,
sell it to them. तो एक तो
ठीक
उसका
बात.
है, एक तो शायद मेरे ख्याल से उस पे रिव्यू है कि where it is going and how we need to speed it up, because with Iranians it's also been a hot cold relationship when it comes to
Yeah,
Chaba,
सही.
right? So sometimes it's very good, sometimes it's very bad, it goes dull. There is no positive जो thrust है, forward thrust जो एक चाहिए था,
Hmm.
with regards
Hmm.
to Chaba. I think that has not come from the Iranians. So I think
Yeah.
that is an agenda that will be the bigger agenda. It is not,
Mm-hmm.
he's not carrying the US message. I think he's driving the Indian agenda, which is very, very important. And
Mm-hmm.
Chabar is very, very important for India from geopolitical, aspect of the region as well, because essentially if the Chinese are using the Gwadar, then you need to have some sort of counter, and the counter is sitting in Chabar, right? So
Yeah.
we know what is happening in Balochistan. We know how China is locked on to Gwadar. तो इंडिया के अपने जो रीजनल इंटरेस्ट हैं और रीजनल सिक्योरिटी इश्यूज हैं, आई थिंक वो जो है उनको एड्रेस करना बहुत जरूरी है. So I think that is the major issue there this time, and obviously they are going to talk about what is happening in the Middle East, because India's role is very, very important. India has backed Israel during the start also, which Iranians would not have liked, right? And
Yeah.
India has a
Mm-hmm.
very working relation. I would call it a working relation with Iran for a very long time. So
Hmm.
I think there would be some things which needs to be ironed out with the Iranians as well. There would be some messaging which needs to be carried out to the Iranians as well. And I think India essentially wants this conflict to end, and some suitable or stable peace to come into the region, and I think for that moment India's role as a interlocutor is also very, very important. So I think they
Mm-hmm.
will be delivering a message that they'll be looking at the via medias of how to tone down the conflict, and how essentially to wrap it up, and how to end this conflict rather than how to trigger it into a border region. See, at the end of the day, Iran might be enticing Americans to come in and fight. Yes, you have
Hmm.
Pakistan on one end, you have Afghanistan on one, and then you have Russia on one end. जो हमने सीरिया में देखा, Americans and Russians came eye to eye,
Hmm.
eyeball to
Hmm.
eyeball at many places, especially in Aleppo. So
Hmm.
at the end of the day, the biggest loser in that kind of a scenario is going to be Iran, because Iran will be destroyed, from both sides. Yes, you will be fighting bigger superpowers, but then
Hmm.
Iran will take the maximum toll into it. So I think
Yeah.
Iranians are also aware of that. और ईरान का अगर हम internal political scenario भी देखें, it is not a very, very strong, right? We have seen protests against the Iranian establishment, the Iranian government, a huge
Hmm.
protest we have seen happening. So
Yeah.
people are very, very unrestive of them as well. So
Very.
they are also looking for a regime change. So Iranians also are in a lot of problem. But at the end of the day, so it's going to be interesting visit. I think I will be able to comment more on it once the visit happens, and some sort of
Mm-hmm.
statements come out that will give us some pointers to what have been the core areas of discussion. But जहाँ तक मुझे
Hmm.
लगता है, the core area for me would be Chabar port. And yes, on the
Hmm.
sidelines, India might talk to Iran about the Middle East crisis and would try to offer whatever role India can play in bringing the two sides together, or de-escalation of the situation कहीं पे contain करने के लिए. I think India is
Hmm.
going to do that. These are the two primarily roles I see of Jaishankar ji. But जहाँ तक
Hmm.
border conflict की बात है, at the end of the day, it is Iran which is going to suffer, right? But so Iranians are also playing, a very hard ball. But at the end of the day, where are they going to roll this back? We don't know,
Yeah.
right? Will
That's
this
right.
get rolled back at Houthis? Will it get rolled back when they reach, literally the conflict between Iran and US starts? We don't know where the
Hmm.
ball is going to stop. But Iranians will have to be cautious. They cannot, they're going with a steamrolling kind of an attitude right now. But there could be a huge possibility it can all backfire onto them. Because don't forget that China is essentially looking at Taiwan also. It has interest in Taiwan also, right? So the Chinese might not want to come into a war which they don't want to be a part of, larger part of. Or the Russians are already fighting the Ukrainians and have an upper hand of Ukrainians. Literally, they have an
Yeah.
upper hand now, right? The Ukrainian was is forgotten in US and almost lost on the ground by the Ukrainians. So I don't think that the Russians would also think that we want to get too much into Iran so that then the Ukrainian front essentially starts and then they have a problem.
Yeah.
कि वो जाए
Huh.
यहाँ उधर जाए, right? Winning war
Hmm.
कहीं कष्ट है और यहाँ पर भी वो कष्ट है. So I think there are a lot of downsides for both the sides. Same is the case for US and Israel. You actually don't want this to go, you know, big, because then it is going to hurt the economy. It is going to hurt the US economy. It is going to hurt Israel immensely. It is
Yep.
going to have a huge impact on European economy, on gas supplies, on oil supplies. Everything is going to be very disrupted. So that
Yeah.
is not in the interest of US and
Anybody.
allies. So I think both on both the angles there are downsides and significant downsides to escalation of war rather than the
Hmm.
upsides. And I think it's time that both of them measure and find out what the downsides are and start working towards it. But as of
Hmm.
now, I think escalation is planned. It was always planned that step-by-step escalation to Iran ka tha, instead of opening your front. Now this is also very interesting. The
Hmm.
second natural front which they wanted to open was the Lebanon front, but
Hmm.
surprisingly the Lebanon front is very quiet, right? So there is
Hmm.
shadow box happening there, a little bit a punch to.
Hmm.
That is what is happening. No major outbreak of conflict is happening from Lebanon, but the
Hmm.
Yemenis have. So
Yeah.
Yemenis are expendable forces. They are not Iranians. Uh, they come from they're non-state actors sitting in Yemen. So the
Hmm.
expandables are being used. So maybe they will use the expandables, hurt them to the economy, them to their advantage, and then bring them to the table. So they can talk and they can find maximum benefit for what they want to do about it.
Hmm.
But downside बहुत ज्यादा है, upside दोनों का conflict में बहुत कम है. I think they will have to work it out somewhere. But for now, I see this region flaring up. I see this escalation going up. I will predict more strikes by US and UK, and I will predict more counter strikes and strikes by Houthis as well. So essentially, if you remember, when the Iran-Iraq war broke out, uh,
Hmm.
there was something called the tanker war, which happened. Essentially, they started, attacking each other's oil tankers and disrupting the oil supplies for both sides, and it had a huge global impact as well that time, right? And then
Hmm.
essentially, it had to be brought down by the Americans. So I
Hmm.
think that is the downside of it, because if you carry it for too long, and it's going to hurt everybody, whether it will hurt China also, it will hurt India also, it will hurt Western countries
Everybody.
also,
Yeah.
Middle Eastern countries. So everybody
Hmm.
is a loser. He's going to gain something. Somebody is
Yeah.
going to lose more, going to lose less. But yes, Israelis are going to lose a lot more than somebody else, right? Their LNG exports are suffering already. They
Hmm.
are down, and essentially they're going to lose on that. Their economy will take a hit because the traffic, is
It's anyway
unstable.
down. Yeah. It's
It's
anyway
going
down.
down. Shipping costs are going extremely high. Shipping insurance in that region is going high. Cargo
Yeah.
is going high. So obviously, this all culminates and has an effect on an economy of the
Yeah.
region of the world. But
Hmm.
for now, I don't see the Iranians backing out. I think that this new trigger, I would say, the जो ये नया trigger है of between Yemen and US, and in this area, I see this happening for some time before it reaches a stage, a peak, where then the both sides either back down or go to the next level, depending on
Yeah.
who has what is happening and what is not happening. It
Bilkul.
might
Hmm.
escalate to a next level in Lebanon. It might escalate direct to Iran, or it might stop and start de-escalating. But for now, I think it is the new escalation. This escalation is there to continue.
Thank you so much, Raja Bhai, for this all your explanation, because this gives us some insight into which way it is heading to. And as you rightly pointed out, अभी जैसे ही visit खत्म होती है Dr. Jaishankar की, we'll have more indications as to which way it could go, or what might have been the purpose behind it, real purpose, या उनके outcome क्या होंगे. Again, we'll be talking about it. Thank you so much for now.
Thank you, Mahesh ji.